Welcome to the TomorrowZone Catalyst Podcast. Today, we're diving into one of the bigger leadership challenges, micromanagement. Our guest, Gayle Lantz, is a trailblazer in leadership consulting, and she's the founder of Work Matters. She's also the author of a book, Take the Bull by the Horns, and she is a podcaster, host of CEO on the Go show. I just like how that rhymed. Gayle has over 20 years experience helping CEOs and executives to inspire change, drive growth, and lead with purpose. And she is known for helping leaders to just rethink how they work and to create meaningful impact. So welcome to the show, Gayle.
Thank you, Deb. I'm so glad to be here.
So, Gayle, you've really built a remarkable career in leadership consulting, and I would love if you could just share a bit of your journey. What inspired you to found your company, Work Matters, and dedicate your career to leadership development? Can you just kind of share a bit of your backstory and maybe some of the highlights along the way to what you're doing today?
Sure. I know we could do a whole episode just on that alone, so I'll try to do the short version. But since I know a lot of your listeners are in financial services industry, that's where I started in my corporate career. And over time, found it to be increasingly stressful, managing a team of financial consultants, traveling all the time. And so I knew at one point in my career that I needed to make a change or do something different, not really sure what. Ended up talking to an executive coach outside the organization. And the more I met with him, he said, I think you'd be really good at doing what I do, helping leaders, executives think through their issues and gain clarity that they need to. So long story short, I kind of became the person that I most needed to have when I was leading teams, and really enjoy helping people get a different perspective and clarity around not only what they want to do for their teams and organization, but personally, how you move yourself through your career. So over time, Work Matters has evolved from career development into more leadership development, even looking at organizational development, looking at companies, corporations as a whole, businesses, how they can move forward. So it's just evolved over the years to leverage my executive background that I had at a relatively young age with a really large corporation. So that's the short version.
It's fun to see how our businesses evolve so much along the way.
Yeah. And how pain and challenges can actually turn into value for other people. So many of the lessons that I learned, I feel like have helped me stay in my business as long as I have. So it's turning that into something good.
Well, and it helps too when we can reframe obstacles as opportunities.
Yeah.
And there's so many opportunities to learn along the way. So one of the things I know that you've learned along the way is some really great strategies for dealing with micromanagement. And we were talking recently, and this topic caught my attention. I heard you do a whole podcast episode on the topic of micromanagement. And in the work that we do in the finance industry and helping teams with digital transformation initiatives, this topic can pop up and rear its ugly head from time to time. So I can't wait to dive in with you on this topic. I was wondering, though, just to kind of set the stage, could you first just share with our audience how you would define micromanagement and why does it tend to emerge even among well-intentioned and seasoned leaders?
Yeah, I think in the simplest definition is that it's when a leader or a manager is closely controlling or overseeing an employee's work to the point where that person doesn't have independence in how they're working or they're not able to make decisions. And I think there are actually a lot of reasons why it can show up. Mm-hmm. What I've found in my experience is that some leaders are aware that they have that tendency and others are not, or they like to see it differently. But I think it arises a lot from having fear of some kind, like when you're new in your role, when you're transitioning into a new role as a leader, you kind of want to, get a grasp on your team and a pulse on what's going on. And sometimes it really feels threatening or overbearing on your team. So that could be one reason that micromanagement seems to appear during episodes like that, when there's a certain experience that's driving that. Some managers tend to be just overly perfectionistic, depending on the field, especially if you're, getting numbers right, making sure that you're,
a big one.
In your field, you want to get things done the right way. And there are a lot of industries and people who are experts in their field who are rewarded for making sure everything is done a very specific way. Well, in leadership, it can get messy. There's not always a clear-cut way to do things. And so sometimes people, I think, are micromanagerial when they have a sense of being perfectionistic. And then one other thing is sometimes they've seen that modeled by other leaders, unfortunately. If you're in an environment where there's kind of a culture of that, then you tend to become a lot like leaders that you've had experience with. So that can be another reason.
Yeah.
Being in a fear-based culture. Yeah. So there are quite a few reasons.
I never really thought about fear as a driver for micromanagement.
I think that's the main thing. Either you're afraid that you could make a mistake or lose business, look bad, reputation. So I'm always thinking fear of what? But there's usually some kind of fear-based behavior going on.
That was really helpful. So one of the things that we are often exploring in our show and in the work that we do is the real importance of the human side of innovation. And so I'm curious about your perspective on this. What is the impact on innovation when it comes to micromanagement?
Yeah, I think micromanagement is a threat to innovation, or it can really hinder it, because essentially it's not allowing other people to become good problem solvers. If you're the leader or the manager that always knows the answers, or you're directing people, you're walking them through the steps, you're telling them what to do, then it doesn't help them develop the capacity that they need to have to be able to really think through things in a way that can be a little bit out of the norm, have new ideas, thoughts of their own that they might want to implement. So I think that it can be a huge deterrent to problem solving, and good problem solving is needed everywhere.
I could really see that. As I was listening to you, I was thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, because that could really not only stunt the growth of the people in your team if they're not really being allowed to bring their ideas to the table, but when it comes to innovation, one of the things we talk about a lot is the need for real psychological safety, because innovation can't flourish in an environment where we can't have a free flow of ideas. And thought diversity and curiosity are really important components and ingredients to true innovation and fresh ideas. Do you have any examples from your experience on how micromanagement could impact innovation, or how you may have been able to turn it around?
Yeah, in my own personal life example, years ago when I was in corporate, managed a team of financial consultants, as I mentioned, and had a pretty broad geographic territory, connected to a lot of clients that I was serving, that my team was serving. And then at the time we had a new boss that came in, manager over me, that immediately started to impose a process, asking lots of questions, wanting lots of updates. Whereas we had been tracking along a high-performing team, showing a lot of success, but there wasn't a lot of listening going on or curiosity at the time. It was just coming in with, this is what we need to do, and I'm going to make sure that we're following through on these steps. So I think in some ways it shut down what our team was doing, because we felt like there was an imposed process with a manager checking up all the time. It really, I think, took away from a lot of the innovative or creative work that we could do in developing client relationships. It became a lot more transactional oriented. Ironically, when you're trying to build business, you want to become more relational. So I think that was one example way back when micromanagement was a problem. It also happens a lot, I think, in sales, where a sales manager comes in and they feel a lot of pressure and they want the sales professionals to be performing well. And so they're checking up and they have weekly updates. And sometimes there's a lot of pressure that can really impact an employee's work. So that's another typical kind of scenario where I think it inhibits the salesperson from being able to be creative and innovative in how they're going about developing the relationship. Again, it's similar theme, not being too attached to the transactional process, but allowing that wiggle room to adapt your approach to different kinds of clients and different kinds of situations and relationships. So
yeah, it sounds like it really not only impacts the innovation and creativity, but the adaptability of a team. I can see how that would really just negatively impact relationship building, because that's not a linear process.
Right. But they'll say, well, how many calls did you make? And the salesperson might say, I already have what I need. I don't need to bother them again, or it's not the right time to call on them again. But the sales manager's pushing, but we need to do this. You know, we've got to make our numbers by the end of the month. That kind of pressure is really counterproductive. So, and that could actually be one of the signs too, that micromanagement is showing up when your people are kind of shutting down, or when they feel like they're disengaging and not really as active as they used to be. So,
yeah. What are some of the other symptoms that micromanagement might be in play?
Well, I think there are probably two different kinds. There's the observations, like you look at yourself and see, am I checking in too much? Am I involving myself in activities where I really don't need to be, where my team members should be able to handle this? Am I getting nervous when I'm not hearing from people? So there's kind of the self check-in. And then what I was alluding to before, there are kind of outward signs where you can look to the people that you're working with and you can sense morale is low, or it seems to be off, or I'm not getting feedback from this person, or this team seems to be disengaged. That's often a starting point with some of the clients that I work with. And then when we reverse engineer, it points to the leader as being a factor in impacting that. So those are kind of clues to look for. It's not always the case. It could be many other things, but those are typical kinds of scenarios where people say, why bother? If my manager is just going to take over, or if they don't let me do anything that I want to do, why am I even here?
Yeah. I can see how it would just be incredibly demotivating. So, well, what are some of the mindset shifts or practices that could help to reduce that tendency to dive in and kind of micromanage?
Yeah. It's hard not to if you've been doing it for a while, I have to say.
Imagine.
But I think really shifting how you see your role as a leader is a good starting point. So instead of, I have to make sure everybody's doing their work in the right way, it's, I'm a coach. I'm supporting them. I'm encouraging them. Some of the feedback that I hear from people who are being micromanaged is that they feel like they can never do anything right. They're not getting enough positive reinforcement or feedback. Mm-hmm. So to know that the role of a coach is to empower, to encourage, to try to increase capability in the people that you're leading. So to see yourself as kind of a catalyst in the process, or a coach, I think is really valuable, instead of the person who has to do it or make sure that it's being done in ways that you think it should be. Focus on the outcome too. That's another mindset shift. A lot of meetings, even today, are check-in meetings where you want to make sure, what are the tasks that you have completed this week or this month? And people have completely lost sight of, why are we doing, what is the ultimate outcome? Maybe we need to shift some of the tasks that we're doing. So, that's another shift, is to not be the taskmaster, but the vision holder, the outcome, oriented leader, the strategically focused leader, which is a whole other topic, because I feel strongly that not enough leaders have been trained or know enough about how to even think strategically or operate from that higher level. And that's why they allow themselves to do a lot of what they're comfortable with because they may have come into their role being really good at getting things done. So that's a whole other conversation.
That's interesting, actually, because I'm thinking about, the type of work that is done in digital transformation and innovation. It's incredibly uncomfortable, especially for leaders, because often we're doing things that haven't been done before, or maybe if they've been done elsewhere, they haven't been done within this team before, or within this company or this environment before. And so there is a lot of uncertainty. There's that fear. What if I'm not going to be good at this? Or what if I can't figure this out?
Yeah.
As well as tremendous pressure. So one of the things I find myself doing in my advisory work is coming up alongside leaders and helping them to think strategically in this new area, because often they're not comfortable with technology and the digital transformation itself, but how do we help them stay on that level where they're the holder of the vision?
Yeah.
And thinking strategically. I hadn't heard that phrase before as a frame for the role of the leader, but I love it, being the holder of the vision.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Well, I think it takes continuing to keep that on the radar. So as a holder of the vision, your role is to continually put that back in front of people in some way or another. And I often like to suggest creative ways to do that through imagery, through metaphors, through examples of what the picture looks like. Storytelling is another way that you can do that. So again, some of these skills are a little different for some leaders who haven't had the experience with it, but it takes that kind of paradigm shift of, no, my role is to make sure that the big picture is clear and that the strategic priorities related to that picture are clear, that we're not just doing our way through, our day-to-day work, that we're aligning with what we said was most important.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. I've found that it can take only weeks before a team completely forgets why they started on a big initiatives journey in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's just and it can be simple. Just a reminder, here's why we're here. Here's what the finish line looks like, and keep that frame in front of people.
Yeah. It reminds me of a story. So I was working with a global captive equipment finance company, and they were doing a large scale rollout of an origination platform around the world. And the thing I remember most from working with that group is the way that we kept that vision in the forefront. We actually started every single meeting with a recitation of why we're doing what we're doing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it was like you couldn't forget it.
Yeah, I guess not every day.
Yeah. But it was like, I thought, wow, it feels like it's extremely repetitive. But then when I stepped back and looked at what we were doing, I realized, even though it sounds like we're having to say this way too often, because this is cross-functional, it's impacting so many different divisions, departments, lines of business, and whatever. You have to keep saying it because the players keep changing and shifting, and we want everybody to have a shared understanding of what we're doing.
And visions by nature can be kind of nebulous. And some people have a problem with that because some companies say, we want to be the biggest whatever, or the best whatever, or the number one. And so the question is always, well, what does that look like? How would you recognize that? So being able to really paint that picture vividly is so critical to do. And again, the storytelling, being able to share stories of what the future looks like. As an example, when we're serving our customers in the future, this is what it's going to look like. This is why we're doing it. So I'm glad your process worked to state it every day. I would add to that to shake it up and have creative ways to keep the vision in front.
Yeah. I like that. The images are really important. One project that worked on in my past, we were reimagining the whole end-to-end origination process. So we actually put these big posters of what the new process is going to look like in the future, like the highest level, everywhere. every conference room had, this is our future state, and so every conversation we could, and as we're on our way to the future state, the topic we're talking about it today is right here in the process, and we could point to it. But it was kind of like a mall map for, where we are and where we're going.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. Sometimes you can't map it easily, but any kind of visual can help reinforce it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of excited that this conversation went that way, because I had never thought about dealing with micromanagement by implementing visuals and imagery to help people understand the future state.
Oh, yeah. With one project I did with NASA, actually, a lot of engineers, we were talking about that. We brought in graphic artists to depict the images that came to mind in our session as we were visioning. So it was really powerful to have some kind of image. It doesn't have to be perfect, beautiful, but just something that can help anchor some of the key aspects of the vision that are most important.
Yeah. Well, and then everybody's looking at the same picture at the same time and not inventing different pictures in their head as we're saying the same words. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool. So what if you're in a situation where you think micromanagement is happening to you, like as an individual or, a team member? Like, what can you do to address this, other than get fed up and quit
and complain? And
yeah, I mean, are there other things that you can do?
Yeah. And first, I want to acknowledge that there are micromanagement is not always a bad word. There may be times when it's appropriate. So if you're new in your role, it's likely you might have more micromanagement on the front end, at least. Or if there's a skills gap, something that you need to learn. So I want to say that at the get-go, that there are times when it's appropriate. But when it's not
in those times also, it might actually feel comforting.
It could be, yeah.
If you're really new at something and it's high stakes.
Yes, yeah, high stakes projects. If you're in crisis mode, then that's another kind of scenario in which micromanagement seems to be heavier. But in the normal day-to-day work, if you're feeling like you're being micromanaged, I think the solution is really to engage in conversations that you need to have with that person. And there are ways to do that can be very disarming, very natural. So many people think, do I need to confront my boss and say, stop doing this? And it's really, I wouldn't think of it with that tone. It's more of an invitation to your boss to say, I really appreciate what I've been able to do, or the role that I have, or what you've been helping me do. You always lead with appreciation. I really like that as a tip. And then the other thing is to use I statements. So you can say, I noticed when we were involved in this project, I felt like there was, I wasn't able to contribute ideas that I had been thinking of, or whatever the scenario is, but just to state how you're feeling and then what you'd like to see instead. And you can be direct in saying, I really would like more opportunity to work more independently, or to be able to run farther, faster, and wanted to think through how we might be able to make that happen. So that's a gentler kind of, it's not, hopefully wouldn't put a leader on the defense, but it's just raising this as an issue that ideally will help performance overall. When you're looking at it in the context of a growth opportunity, that can be really helpful too, to let your manager know, I'm really looking to grow. In what ways might I be able to take on some parts of the project that I could run independently? So it's just asking those questions, open-ended questions, and then ending with call to action. Like, what can we do as a result of this? What can we try? What would be one first step? So something along those lines. I know every scenario is different, but I wouldn't be afraid to bring up the issue. You don't have to say, you're being a micromanager and you're driving me crazy. It's, I was wondering if we could have a conversation so I could just share some observations lately, or some of my thoughts on what I might be able to do to move forward in some ways, or help the project move forward, or, improve my performance, or get even better at what I'm doing. So anything along those lines, make it invitational.
I love that approach, an invitation to a conversation, because it also opens the door to co-creation of the solution. So now you're collaborating.
Yes. And for people that might be watching or listening to this going, oh, you don't know my boss, I can't do that. I just challenge you to try it because don't sit there and stew and get frustrated. Like, don't be afraid to just say, I would really like to have a conversation. It might be a little different than we've had before, but it would really be helpful to me. If you have a boss that resists that, then that's a bigger problem. But don't be afraid to do it.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you one more question before we go to the final question. We're coming toward the end of our time. I can't believe how fast this has
I can easily get off track. Yeah.
But it's just been really awesome, though, and valuable. I was curious, in the work that you do in leadership development and organizational development, what do you see on the horizon for leadership? So much is changing in our world today. So how should we be thinking about leveling up our leadership as we go into 2025?
Yeah, I think looking out, leadership is changing. The whole talent is changing. Talent management's changing, all of that. So leadership has to change. Our environment's changing. But I think for leaders to be aware, it's becoming more of a shared leadership model or less hierarchy. Like there's not this top-down kind of approach that you're used to. And then also leadership will become more project-oriented, I think, where you'll be brought into a project for a much more short-term type of experience, and you'll need to be able to have ready-to-go resources, pull in teams or whatever you need. That won't be the long, extended year after year kind of leadership model that you're used to, but more kind of just-in-time leadership, depending on what's happening, because things are changing so fast. Adaptability is the number one skill that leaders need right now.
Ooh.
And thinking about that, I think this might be a different kind of answer, but I think you need to focus on yourself as a leader and what you're really energized about, what you care most about. So, because when you align yourself with what you care about, you're more powerful. If you feel like you're going through the motions of having to achieve a goal that your organization thinks you should achieve, or that you think you should for whatever reason, but you really don't have your heart in it, then I don't think you can make as much of an impact. I switched tracks. I left the financial services world because I didn't really want to talk about numbers anymore. I left talking about interpersonal dynamics and helping people work through difficulties and challenges. And I feel like my alignment helps me be more effective in the work that I'm doing, which helps me in the world, which helps me have a bigger impact with the people and organizations that I work with. So checking for that alignment, really kind of going deep and saying, what do I really care about now? That's where you as a leader can make your biggest impact.
That's awesome. Well, Gayle, I just want to thank you for sharing your valuable insights with us on leadership and its impact on innovation.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we could have the conversation, and I admire the work that you're doing too. So we're very aligned in what we're each doing, even though we're doing different ways. So really appreciate the impact that you're making.
Thank you for that. So today we explored the impact of micromanagement and how leaders can break free from it to build trust and empower their teams. If today's conversation resonated for you, then be sure to connect with Gayle at workmatters.com or check out her podcast, CEO on the Go, to get more fresh insights on leadership. And as always, we want to thank you for tuning into the TomorrowZone Catalyst podcast. And I encourage you to stay curious and let's keep making awesome happen.